So let's talk about hooks. So before even explaining what a hook is, I would like to present you, not a problem, but I would like to present you in a scenario where eventually hooks will essentially help to deal with it. So as I told you before, later on as part of the next workshop, I would like to create a menu with React. Yeah. So essentially, we do have a button. So whenever I click on the button, I will show a menu. I'm thinking on mobile mainly, yeah, but obviously the principle may apply to desktop as well. So if I click on the button, the menu is visible. If I click again, the menu gets hidden. Yeah, that's pretty much the idea. So the first part of this session is about creating a button. I want to create a button. So then I want to check if the button has been pressed or not. It's like switching the lights, yeah. When I switch the lights are on. When I switch the lights again, the lights are off, on and off. It's just a toggle, yeah. So let me create a function. You know that in reality, all the new components should be dropped in new files. But for educational purposes, for simplicity reasons, let's create a function here for now. So I would like to have a function called menu. Not a function, sorry. I would like to have a class, yeah, because I want to have a state. So far, the only way we know to deal with the state is by using classes. So you got the class menu, extends react.component. I'm not going to really slow down and explain everything here because you already know these things. So I'm essentially repeating myself. I'm creating a full component. So remember, you need to declare the constructor, typing super, and then you have to set up some state. So this dot state dot equal, and then is open false. Yeah. So whenever I click on the button, I will switch this flag to true and vice versa. If it's true, I will switch it to false. On the render function, I will return, I don't know. Yes, maybe let's create a div, and as part of the div, for now we'll have a button. Later on we'll add more content like menu elements, whatever. But for now, let's just have a button. So button, and then let me call it menu. I don't really care about CSS for now. On click equals, I'm going to call a function called this.toggle menu. Yep. So now as part of my toggle menu function, can anyone complete this? Well, not complete, sorry. Can anyone tell me how can I change the state to switch from false to true and vice versa? Yep. So will that, Adam, will that toggle the state from false to true and from true to false? So Ian, what's your suggestion? Like that? Interesting. Interesting. What do you think about this, guys? What's the value of the variable is open? Ian? Wrong. That's not correct. Are you declaring any variable called is open? Do you have any const is open? That makes more sense, yeah? And that's correct. That's correct, Ian. So is open. What's the new state? The new state is a variable called is open, and what's the value? We are negating the previous value. So if it was false, not false is true. If it was true, not true is false. You see, we're switching on and off, on and off, on and off. So then we can simply on the HTML bit, we can have you know, we can have an expression here like is menu open, and then we can play with that a bit. So we can say this dot state dot is open, then yes, else no. Yeah, we can have a ternary, as Panos suggested before, if we want to display a message, a user-friendly message indicating or telling the user whether the menu is expanded or not. So hopefully that's pretty much it. And now the only remaining bit is just obviously let's bind, let's invoke the new component so it can be rendered. All right, so will it work? I have no idea. Let's figure it out. Cool. So let me zoom the screen a bit. Is menu open? No. Yes. Yeah, you see, it works, right? I can safely toggle the state from true to false and vice versa. All right, is there any question so far? So you want to... Yeah. I'm not following you. Yep. 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 In the toggle menu. So instead of saving a boolean, you want to save the string. You want... Technically speaking, yes, but I see, yeah, you're right. So technically speaking, we could do that. We could say it's open, no, but now you're making your toggle menu a bit more complicated, because what you're doing here now is this dot state dot is open equal no, then yes, else. I find that a bit more complicated because you are comparing strings. I believe that comparing booleans is easier, right? And also, if you need to check the value somewhere else, I don't know. I find it slightly more natural. But yeah, you're right. Technically speaking, if you wanted, you can definitely do that. Any other questions, guys, about this example? No? Hello? All good? Cool. So now what I would like to do is I'm going to rebuild this snippet using a hook. So instead of using a class, I would like to rebuild it using a function. So yeah, definitely, Panos. So I'm just sharing this is the classic version of creating a menu, and that's, don't get me wrong, guys, that's, yeah, definitely, that's still okay. I mean, the reason why we started with the classic instead of with the shiny way is because if you get a job tomorrow, you know, I mean, if you join a startup, if you're in a greenfield project, they are likely to use the modern version. But the majority of the tech, even if you're working with a new product, if they created a component 6 months ago, which is yesterday pretty much, they are likely to use classes. So it's very important to understand and to control how to deal with classes in React. Okay, so I got my class, and now let's try to find out how to solve the same problem, literally the same problem. I'm going to rename it to menu old if you want. So I'm going to create a new function menu to solve the same problem. So imagine that I have no idea about what a hook is. It's my first time dealing with React. So I'm just going to follow my gut feelings. So following my gut feelings, what I will do is I will create a variable called let is open equals false. Yeah. And now I'm going to have the return statement, button, on click, and then how do we deal with that? So on click, let me call a function called toggle menu. So you know I can create a new function here called toggle menu, and then I will say is open equals not is open, and then we simplify the expression to access the menu, yeah? the state. So that will be what any new developer into React will try to do. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. But let's see what happens if we run this code. I hope, guys, you understand that bit of code. I just have a function. So that's a simplistic component written in React. The function returns a piece of HTML, but the trick here is I'm saving a variable with my state. Yeah. By default, the value of the state is set to false, and then when I click on the button, I call a function that is inside of my component, which is absolutely valid, of course, and then as part of the function, I will change the state. That's the idea. That idea is wrong, but that's the idea. Let's have a look why this is wrong. So first of all, the component renders. So visually speaking, that looks okay. You see, is menu open? No. So by default, it's okay. The problems start as soon as I try to change the state, because that's not gonna work. If I click here, you see, I'm clicking on the menu, and the state never changes. The reason why this code is wrong, you may get a similar question in a job interview. That's because React is not re-rendering. React doesn't know why the hell the component has to be redisplayed. Do you remember, guys, when talking about classes, we call set state? Yeah? And I told you a couple of weeks ago, we call set state because when you call set state, React knows we want to re-render. Because React re-renders, React updates the user interface. That's the beautifulness about set state. However, you don't have access to this, you don't have access to this.set state, you don't have access to any of that in a function. So you don't know how to tell React, please, I'm changing the state, so please update the user interface. That was very romantic. That's actually doing nothing. The user interface is not going to be redisplayed. That's wrong, essentially. So if that's wrong, how can we solve it? Let me present you some. Go for it, Minji. Yeah. That's a good question. And the answer is not as simple as yes or no. Because React is essentially maybe calling that function multiple times. So even if it's, regardless of whether it's changing or not, the important thing is, even if it's changing, that change is lost. So effectively is not changing. As you can see, from a user point of view, as you can see, the value is never changing from no to yes. So to keep the long story short, no, the value is not changing. Yeah. All right, so let me present you something that you already know. So do you remember, guys, how to do object destructuring, right? So if I got a variable called user and I got first name Peter age 34, so do you know, guys, can you tell me, guys, how can I create two variables to hold the first name and the age of the user using destructuring? Yeah, and remember, guys, if you're creating variables, you need to do something like that. Yeah, that's correct, Minji. So that's the easiest way of creating two variables, first name and age, associated to the values of the user object. So that line of code is equivalent to running let first name equals user.firstName, and likewise let age equals user.age. Yeah. So these two lines of code can be transformed into a single line, which is more convenient for simplicity reasons. Fantastic. That's about objects. But what about arrays? Imagine that I got an array of usernames, Peter, Mary, and now I want to have a variable pointing to each individual element on the list. So for instance, I can create a variable called first user equals, how do I access the first element of the array, guys? users square bracket 0, correct? And then second, likewise, I can access second users square bracket 1. So that's the way we could have a variable pointing to the first element of the array and another variable pointing to the second element of the array. Okay, that's absolutely fine. However, is there a way to destructure that? Can I? Yeah, Adam. Yep. That's absolutely correct, Adam. That's beautiful. Yeah, Adam is right. So that's the way we can destructure an array. If you pay attention, the syntax is equivalent to object destructuring. Yeah, because we want to destructure an array instead of an object, we put curly braces, square brackets instead of curly brackets, and then we have two variables, first user. So because that's the first element of this new array, that means that the first element of the user's array will be saved into that variable. And likewise, the second element on the user's array will be saved into this variable. Yeah? So that's the way array destructuring works. Do you have any questions about array destructuring? No? Okay, so why am I telling you that? The reason why I'm now suddenly talking about array destructuring is because in order to understand hooks, we are going to use array destructuring. So, to use hooks, I'm now writing on the first line of my code, I'm importing a new component from React. And that new component is called useState. Yeah? Pay attention to the syntax, guys. React is written like that, without any curly braces. Yeah, just React, comma, and now useState is written inside of curly braces. Can anyone figure out why useState is written inside of curly braces but React is not? From the import-export logic, what's the reasoning behind? No, that's wrong. That's not the reason, I'm afraid, Dan. No, that's wrong as well. That's wrong as well. Guys, do you remember when we talked about coding best practices a couple of weeks ago? We say that you can export things in two ways, right? You can do export default, whatever, yeah, or you can simply do export whatever. If you remember, when you do export default function, by the way, when you do export default whatever, then you import it like that. Import from, whatever. And then whatever else, let's have two methods. Imagine that we have a file with these components, with two functions, yeah, whatever and whatever else. If we wanted to import the other one, we surround it by brackets. So whenever the export is not default, we have to surround it by curly braces. Why? Well, because we may have multiple non-default exports, and then we can import them all using a comma separated list surrounded by curly braces. Yeah. So what's the message here? React, the core of the framework, the core of the library is doing somewhere export default React, yeah, something like that, and then somewhere else is doing export useState. That's a way to describe your API. What's the most important component exported by React? React. But then they offer a bunch of alternative utilities like useState and many others that go, let's say, beyond the scope of this session. Yeah? So that's the first thing. We need to import useState with curly braces. And then what? But let's pay attention to the syntax. So useState returns an array with two elements. The first one, useState is a method let me rephrase that. It's a method that receives a single argument with the default state and returns an array with 2 elements. The first element is the state itself. The second element is a method to update the state. Yeah, I'll send you that on Slack later on. Yeah, let's present an example. I'm going essentially, as you know, to rebuild that problem, which is quite simple. So hopefully we'll help to understand it, to understand the solution using a hook. So user state is a method. Yeah, that's the first thing. Is a method. Receives a single argument. So what's the single argument? With the default state. Can you tell me, guys, what's the default state? The default state is false. That's correct, yeah? False. And then it returns an array with 2 elements. I'm going to destructure that. The first element is the state, the variable holding the state. So I'm going to call it is open. The second argument, the second element, is a method to update the state. So the second argument is a method. So generally speaking, I think the convention is to call the second argument, even though you can type whatever you want here, but I think the convention is to call it set is open. In other words, set, because you want to set it, and then the name of the variable. So now, can anybody complete this exercise? Can anybody tell me what should I write here? Which method should I call when I click on the button? That's correct. That's correct, Ian. Set is open. And what's the value? Which value should I pass here? Like that? Not is open, correct. We want to negate it. That's correct. That's it. That's it, guys. This snippet is equivalent to that class. And I hope you agree with me. This is much simpler. Yeah? Because all the complexity sits here. You create 2 variables with a state. The first variable holds the state. The second variable is an actual method to change the state. So what's the difference now? The difference regarding or in relationship to the previous example with the function is when we click on the button, we call a method set is open. And because React understands that method, because React is offering it to you, so React knows that whenever that method is invoked, that's because you want to redisplay, you want to re-render. Yeah. So in other words, if I refresh, look, if I press on menu, it should change to yes. Here you go. You see, and now it should change to no. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And that's it. Questions? That's controversial, as I said, Adam. I mean, if thinking about the future, hooks are expected to replace classes. So long term, using hooks is way more important than using classes. However, I'm not that convinced that short term that's the case. As I said before, it depends on the project you land. If you start a new project today, you are likely to stick to that pattern all the time, or the majority of the time. However, you are likely to deal with legacy code. Be careful, guys. When I say legacy code, I'm not talking about 10 years old code. If someone wrote that code 1 year ago, yeah, I'm sure they were using classes instead of hooks. Hooks is a very new thing in React. It's very trendy, very popular, but guys, be careful because it's very new. That's why it's important to dominate both coding styles, at least in the short term. So what are the advantages of using hooks? I'll tell you two advantages. First of all, I mean, the code is simpler. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. The code is simpler. The second advantage is, and that may not be that obvious, regardless of the simplicity of the new approach, there is, to me, a huge advantage of using hooks. When you deal with classes, you have to type this dot many times. As you probably already noticed, it is very complicated to deal with this object in JavaScript. Once again, we'll talk about it on the last week of the bootcamp, week number 8. Yeah, but for now, just rest assured that what we call the lexical this object is something tricky. So lexical this only apply to classes. Yeah. So when you deal with functions, you don't have to write this at all. In other words, the components get much simpler. It's not just about the number of lines of code you have to write, it's about the complexity of each line. Yeah. Any questions, guys? Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely, my friend. You can have more. You can have another one. So, for instance, you can declare how many times we click on the button. So we can have another variable called counter and set counter. By default, how many times we click? 0. Yeah. So now when we click on the button, let me then call a new method called toggle menu. So now if I write a function called function toggle menu, I can update both variables. Yeah, I can change the set is open, and now I can increase the counter. Can anyone tell me how can I increase the counter here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Like that. Yeah, I love that, Minji. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. You see? Set counter was the new counter, whatever the counter was, plus 1. So now I can display a new message saying the button has been clicked counter times. Yeah, that's it. So if I now, even though the UI is a bit weird, but I hope it makes the trick. So pay attention to the right hand side. That's 0. Yeah, as you can see, is changing all the time. So of course, Ian, you can have as many variables as you want, and you can update them whenever you want. Anything else, guys? Yes, Minji. So at the moment, the state is very simplistic. Yeah, it's just a number, a number or a boolean. Of course, it could be a string. Can we have more complex data structure? Yes, of course. We can have arrays, we can have objects, we can have whatever you want. Yeah. Don't forget something, guys. This is just an intro to hooks. There are more challenging aspects of dealing with hooks, for instance, calling the backend. I know many of you at the moment are working on task number 22, 23, 24, so it could be a beautiful exercise to refactor your components into hooks. You know, guys, that on the next month you are expected to run a workshop about using advanced hooks. Oh, sorry, you have to run a workshop about whatever you want. Sorry. No. Sorry. But advanced hooks is a beautiful topic. So if any of you is interested on mastering hooks, then my advice is to select that topic, how to use advanced hooks. Why? Well, because don't forget something, guys. So eventually you'll go to a job interview and you'll have to prove your value. Hooks is a very trendy topic at the moment. So if you do a workshop about hooks, you are proving that you have genuine interest on the topic and you really dominate them. And that sort of a skill is very appreciated by companies dealing with React. So just think about it. And if you want some extra reason to convince you to do a workshop about hooks, on the last cohort, one of the guys did that workshop about advanced hooks. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to think about how to deal with advanced hooks because someone else did that already. So you can take that workshop. It's not about copy the workshop, but it's about taking it as a reference. Yeah. So just think about it. Any other questions, guys? Anything else? No? Yes, one more thing. One last thought. Do you remember, guys, when dealing with classes, we had to deal with that weird syntax, you see? When we call a function and then we call our function. When talking about hooks, you can do the same if you want, that's fine. I'm not against that pattern. However, if you want, you can simplify that. Look, instead of writing the whole expression, you can do that. Be careful. I'm not calling the function because if I call the function, that will create an infinite loop. I'm just saving a reference. When the user clicks on the button, then call that function. Yeah, so that function will be called. If we run this snippet, you see, it still works. Now there are no issues. Why there are no issues? Because we don't have this object, so there are no chances to break it because we don't deal with it anymore. So that's a second advantage of using hooks, which is the same as the one I mentioned before. It simplifies your code because we don't depend on the lexical this object at all. Anything else, guys? No? Are you sure? Cool, fantastic. So I'm going to share that on Slack. Make sure you play with it a bit. That's it. So yeah, that was it from my side, guys. Let's do a 5 minutes break, and I will take this snippet. I will simplify it a bit as starting for the next workshop about creating a menu with React. So see you in 5 minutes. Thank you, guys.